It began with a faint wisp of smoke, a ghost in the machine. But on a routine flight high above the American heartland, a ghost can become a monster in minutes. For the 41 passengers and 5 crew members of Air Canada Flight 797, the familiar comfort of their airliner was about to become a mile-high trap. This is the story of a desperate race against time, a battle against an invisible enemy, and a tragedy that would rewrite the rules of aviation safety forever. June 2, 1983. On the tarmac at Dallas, Fort Worth International Airport, Air Canada Flight 797 is preparing for a routine evening hop. The aircraft is a McDonnell Douglas DC-9, a workhorse of the skies, reliable and trusted. The flight is scheduled to fly northeast, over the United States, before crossing into Canada and landing at Toronto's International Airport. It's a clear night, perfect flying weather. In command is Captain Donald Cameron, a seasoned and respected pilot with over 12,000 flight hours. Beside him is First Officer Claude Ouimet, capable and experienced. As the passengers board, they're thinking of home, of business meetings, of loved ones waiting at the gate. They settle into their seats, fasten their seatbelts, and trust completely in the machine and the crew that will carry them there. But no one on board had any idea that the next few hours would change everything. The takeoff from Dallas was smooth and uneventful. Flight 797 climbed to its cruising altitude of 33,000 feet. The cabin was calm, the gentle hum of the engines was a lullaby. Flight attendants began the beverage service. Passengers drifted to sleep or gazed out at the starlit sky. The first sign of trouble was subtle, almost innocuous. About halfway through the flight, as they flew over Kentucky, passengers in the rear of the aircraft reported a strange, acrid smell coming from the lavatory. It was the scent of something burning. Not smoke, not yet. Just a hint of electrical fire, the smell of overheated plastic and insulation. A flight attendant investigated. She found nothing, no flames, no visible smoke. Perhaps it was a burnt-out motor in a flushing mechanism, or a faulty wire in the lighting. It seemed minor. A note was made to have it checked by maintenance in Toronto. The flight continued, but the enemy was hiding, smoldering silently within the walls of the aircraft. Then, the situation escalated in a heartbeat. The faint smell became a thick, choking plume of black smoke pouring from the bottom of the lavatory door. The calm of the cabin was shattered by coughs and cries of alarm. In the cockpit, a warning light flashed. Forward lavatory smoke. Captain Cameron immediately initiated the emergency descent checklist. They needed to get down, fast. He contacted air traffic control. His voice was calm, but urgent. Center, Air Canada 797, we have smoke in the cabin. Request an immediate descent and vectors to the nearest suitable airport. The nearest airport was Cincinnati. It was 80 miles away. At this moment, it might as well have been on the other side of the world. Inside the cabin, chaos was taking hold. The smoke grew thicker, hotter, and more toxic. It began to pool along the ceiling, then descended, forcing passengers and crew to crouch on the floor to breathe what little clean air remained. Flight attendants, heroes in the truest sense, moved through the choking gloom, distributing wet towels and trying to keep people calm. Inside the cockpit, confusion and fear began to rise as the instruments started to fail. The smoke had breached the flight deck. It stung their eyes, making it difficult to read the gauges. Electrical systems began to short out. One by one, warning lights and systems flickered and died. They were flying blind, in every sense of the word. The plane was becoming a ghost ship, guided only by the pilot's raw skill and the last functioning primary instruments. They were still minutes from Cincinnati, minutes they no longer had. Then, the unthinkable happened, a flashover. The superheated, toxic gases in the cabin ignited. A fireball erupted, racing through the passenger compartment. The force of it blew a hole in the fuselage. In the cockpit, the last thing Captain Cameron heard was a deafening roar. He felt a massive jolt. The controls went slack. Flight 797 was now a falling, burning torch. At 8:13 p.m., just moments from salvation, Air Canada Flight 797 crashed into a field near Covington, Kentucky. The impact was violent, catastrophic. In the cold light of dawn, investigators from the NTSB arrived at a grim scene. The wreckage was devastating, but amidst the tragedy, they had to find answers. Why did a routine flight end in fire and disaster? The evidence pointed them back to that rear lavatory. The fire's origin was traced to a hidden space behind the washroom mirrors, where a motor for the flushing system was located. The investigation revealed a fatal design flaw. The motor had failed, overheated, and ignited the highly flammable insulation and sound-dampening materials surrounding it. Because it was buried within the wall, the fire smoldered for precious minutes, unseen, building up heat and toxic gases before finally bursting into view. The official report concluded that the crash was not caused by the impact, but by the fire and smoke. The toxic fumes had likely incapacitated or killed many of those on board before the plane even hit the ground. The flashover and subsequent rupture of the fuselage led to the immediate loss of control. But the investigation asked a more haunting question: could more have survived? The evacuation was hampered by the intensity of the fire and smoke. Of the 46 people on board, only 23 managed to escape the wreckage. And tragically, 8 of those initial survivors later succumbed to their injuries. The final death toll was 31. Among the dead was Captain Donald Cameron, who stayed at his post until the very end. The tragedy of Flight 797 sent shockwaves through the aviation world. It was a brutal, undeniable lesson written in fire and smoke. In its wake, nothing would be the same. Mandatory smoke detectors and fire extinguishers. All aircraft lavatories were required to have automated smoke detectors and built-in fire extinguishing systems. New materials, strict new regulations were enacted, forcing airlines to replace flammable interior materials with self-extinguishing, fire-blocking layers. Improved crew training. Flight attendant training worldwide was overhauled to include intensive, realistic firefighting and smoke evacuation drills. Floor-level lighting. The now familiar, glowing path lighting on aircraft floors was mandated to guide passengers to exits when smoke obscures the ceiling. Perhaps the most significant change was one we all practice today. The brace for impact position was standardized and emphasized directly because of Flight 797. It was found that passengers who assumed this position had a significantly higher chance of surviving a crash and the evacuation that followed. The 31 souls lost on that Kentucky field did not die in vain. Their story, a harrowing 45-minute race against an invisible flame, forced the industry to look into its own shadows and confront its vulnerabilities. Today, every time you see a smoke detector in a plane lavatory, every time you feel the sturdy, fire-resistant fabric of your seat, you are witnessing the legacy of Flight 797, a legacy of safety, born from the ashes of tragedy.